Tonight, Harley Quinn gives a very explicit look at exactly what she wants to do to billionaire playboy Bruce Wayne. Secret Six, believe it or not, gives an actual reason why a guy named Catman doesn't like getting wet. And Justice League United shows us there might be one or two consequences if you go out and kill God. All that and more tonight on the Not-So-New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 180 of the Not-So-New 52. I am your host, and I'm not really the kind of guy who likes riding people. Don't take that out of context. But I just want to make sure you all are aware. This is going to sound so absolutely petty. Last episode, episode 179, at the time of recording this, got no views. Let me be clear here. This show does not often get a lot of views or listens or whatever you want to call it. It's a niche audience, and I fully accept that. But at the very least, it usually gets around like 20-ish, give or take. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get there, but, around about that level, at least for YouTube's sake. Last episode got 2. So I don't know if you guys were just like not at all interested in what came out that week, which would be confusing because, you wouldn't know until you clicked on it. But you may have missed a week. Please go back and check that out, because stuff happened. Not a lot of stuff, mind you, but some stuff did. Again, I don't want this to sound... I know it does. I absolutely am aware it does. But I don't want it to sound pathetic. Please, guys, go back and watch my show. I worked real hard. No, if you don't have, whatever. I don't care that much. But it just was so weird because we were riding a pretty decent wave of views for a while. And then all of a sudden it's this is the episode where Superman gets his solar flare power. Foomp. No one cares. No one wants to see that. I don't know. It just took me for a loop. Anyway, you can tell by my long rambling opening there, we don't have a lot of comics to talk about this week. I mean, I'm still going to go over on time because I have no idea what self-control means, but it's at least a small number of them. So coming out this week, which by the way is February 11th, if you have forgotten Valentine's Day up until this point, it's too late. May God have mercy on your soul. But we have coming out this week Green Lantern Corps, Justice League 3000, Justice League United, World's Finest, New Suicide Squad, The Secret Six, Constantine, Klarion, our 3 weeklies, which is Batman Eternal, Future's End, and World's End, and we have a special, which kind of bumps this up to be 13 comics, because that is absolutely a double length, but that is the Harley Quinn's Valentine's Day special. Against my better judgment, I'm going to put that first in the episode. I know a lot of people are not interested in hearing that, so please feel free to skip over it if you must, but I want to get it out of the way, because it is a special, and it is also a Bat book. This is the only Bat book that's coming out this week. Technically, if you expand your definition of Bat book to be very liberal, but this is the first time that if I didn't have that, I'd be starting with Green Lantern when it's not an event title, and that's weird to me. I've always had at least one Bat book, so whatever's going on at editorial, get your ducks in order there. Anyway, like I said, long rambling opening, don't really have much more to say. Super Bowl was last night as I record this. I had no stake in it, but I will tell you the commercials were trash. There wasn't a single one that was really interesting. So, congratulations, you showed me probably a collective 2 hours of advertisements, and not a single one of them stuck. I hate the world we live in. Alright, comic time. Harley Quinn Valentine's Day Special number 1, written by Amanda Conner and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by John Timms, Ben Caldwell, Aaron Campbell, and Thony Silas. So, it's Harley Quinn completely set out of any sort of continuity or anything like that. We have Harley riding the ferry across the Hudson River, and apparently she's doing a Titanic bit constantly to the point where the captain comes up being like, hey, how long have you been riding this ferry? And she's like, 2 whole days, but don't worry, I brought toilet paper. And he's like, look, you're standing near the railing doing the I'm King of the World thing. Can you just leave? And she's like, yeah, sure, be back tomorrow. And as she leaves, she looks out of the Hudson and sees a man in a kayak picking up all the dead fish in the Hudson. And he's like super sad about it. And he's like, oh, why must we massacre these poor innocent fish? They will be rude. They will have their vengeance. So says I, Trip Bolidon, a.k.a. the Mighty Carp. So we cut over to Gotham. Batman's coming back from a thing. And it's 2 a.m. and Alfred's still up, ready to present some dinner for him. And Bruce is like, this is unusual. What are you still doing up? And he's like, oh, well, I made you this dinner. It's something, he lists off the whole thing. And he's like, by the way, Bruce Wayne is being auctioned off at a charity event. Someone's going to win a night with Bruce Wayne. And so you got to be there to do that. So we see Harley's paying attention to the news as it's saying the whole Bruce Wayne thing. It's for an animal shelter. It's to raise money for that. And she is hearing, according to the news, that the bidding is expected for this single night with Bruce Wayne to be in the upwards of $1 million. So she's like, I'm in. I gotta do this. I want to go on a date with Bruce Wayne. So she calls up Thony, and Harley says her idea is, hey, in the DC universe, we had our own version of the 2008 housing crisis, and a bunch of billionaires got off scot-free. We're gonna do a Robin Hood, except instead of giving to the poor, it's going to me. And Tony's like, all right, well, I Googled a couple of them, and there are like 4 in the area, so I guess we'll do this burglary tonight, catch a nap, and then we'll do it whenever the sun goes down. And then we literally have her little pet beaver explain to the audience that now we're doing a dream sequence so that we can get a fill-in artist to do part of the book so that the regular artist can meet up with the deadlines. And we do just that, where we see Harley is fantasizing about her life with Bruce, and he's just like a total beefcake, like himbo, absolutely nothing going on upstairs. She's playing polo by bashing in the heads of a bunch of like criminals who barely did anything. And then she goes over to Bruce and he's just like, oh yes, let's have Italian for dinner tonight. And they go up to the bedroom and have sex. And then they're out on a yacht and he's like, oh, Harley, I would love to have children with you. Dozens of them. And she's like, I was thinking like 1 or 2, considering I don't want to mess up my body that bad. And he's like, no, we have to have 72 little feet running around. And she's like, that's 36 kids. Are you crazy? And he's like, oh, but just think about it. And he lists off all these things that like childhood or children would bring. And Harley gets so freaked out about it, she pulls a shotgun and blows away Bruce into the water off the side of the yacht. But he keeps going. He keeps saying like, oh yes, and this and that and the other thing. And we see his body get eaten by sharks. There's then she goes out for a dinner and the fish is talking to her in Bruce's voice, and then she goes to the toilet and whatever's left in the bowl is talking to her, and she's like, all right, I don't like this dream anymore. She flushes the toilet, and as she wakes up she's like, oh god, that was an awful dream, but I still got some time to waste. And the beaver says, I'll just go back to sleep and think about happier things. And then we just resume the dream sequence again, except this time it's slightly nicer, where Harley's imagining getting married to Bruce, and then she takes over like some sort of empire where she's got a whole bunch of like criminal things. And it's like, oh, here are a list of our enemies. Go make them die slowly. Point being is she ends up waking up. Tony's like, all right, let's go. And they get a bunch of tools together. She wonders what they're going to do for a ride. Tony's apparently got a guy who has ice cream trucks, which definitely stands out in the middle of winter, but whatever. And so they make their way across the bay. And they come up to Barney Runoff, who's definitely not supposed to be anyone specifically. And as soon as he opens the door, she just bashes him with the bat. When he starts coming to, she's like, hey, where do you keep your money? Where's your safe? And he's like, I don't have a safe. Tony finds a Ming vase, and he's like, wait, I'll tell you where I keep my money. Just don't hurt the vase. I keep it all under my mattress. And Tony flips up the mattress, and she's like, oh my god, this is perfect. This is fantastic. And as they are leaving with a sack full of cash, we see Harley has put the Ming vase on top of this guy's head and then bashes it with her bat. And she's like, Now listen here, mister. We know that you took billions from those poor hard-working folks. And he's like, ha, no one could prove anything in a court of law. And she's like, I'm not the law. But on one hand, I do like the fact you managed to get away with a crime for so long. On the other hand, you suck. So she says, you know what I'm going to do to you? And then we cut over to the next scene where she's saying to Thony, I told him that he had to give away all of his money in 48 hours or else I'd come back and force him to marry me. And Tony's like, seriously? And she's like, no. Although I may have busted up his kneecaps and took his wife's jewelry. And Tony's like, seriously? And she's like, whatever. So they're driving their way over to the charity event now. We then go to the New York Aquarium where the carp is now planning a thing where he has his own sidekick named Sea Robin, and he says, with all of the money that we can get from this event, we will be able to save all of the sea life. We will set up a sanctuary for them. And Sea Robin's apparently inept because Carp gave him a list of things to do and he lost the list. So he calls up for an Uber and he's like, yeah, it's going to be like half an hour until they get here. It'll cost like $40. And he's like, yeah, all right, I got a coupon. So they get into the Uber. They start driving over. The Uber driver's like, hey, why are you guys wearing costumes? He's like, I'll tell you. I am planning on making a sanctuary for fish, one that no fisherman will be able to ever set proof in. And I will use the money from this animal charity thing. And he's like, wait a minute, that animal charity, isn't that helping cats and dogs? And Carp's like, who cares about cats and dogs? And then the driver immediately kicks them out and forces them to walk. Then Carp, realizing they're still a distance away, pulls out a serum that helps him to bounce like apparently a carp can. And so he grabs hold of Sea Robin and they just jump their way over to the rest of the place. So we get to the Lincoln Center, which is where the thing's going on. Thony drops off Harley. She's wearing a whole new dress and all that. As she gets inside, immediately this old dude comes up being like, hey, I'm filthy stinking rich and you're hot. You want to get out of here? And she's like, you're like 180 years old, dude. That'd be gross. I would hate that. And he's like, so is that a yes? And he's like, yep, go to the room and I'll meet up with you later. And he's like, whoopee, and he runs off. So the bidding starts. Harley starts with $47. It immediately gets up to $200,000. And she's bidding back and forth with this one blonde lady. It eventually hits $1 million. She calls up Thony to see how much she has on hand. He counts up the cash as $1 million plus 100 extra. So she bids that much while she's choking out the blonde lady. And once, twice sold. We cut back to Harley. She's got bloodied knuckles, like a knuckle duster, and the woman's just dead on the ground. So Harley goes up, meets Bruce Wayne. Bruce is like, why in the hell does Harley Quinn want anything with Bruce Wayne? I do not understand this. And immediately as the cash is brought up by Thony, in comes Carp and Sea Robin, who say, freeze! We're going to take all of your wallets and all that cash up there, and we're going to, if everyone complies, no one gets hurt. And Harley's immediately like, get behind me, Mr. Wayne. And he's like, I can handle myself. And she's like, that's cute. And so she starts trying to beat up Carp. He ends up firing a net at her, which is also a taser. So she goes out, and then I think it's Sea Robin, maybe it's Carp again, I don't know, fires off a gun that has sea slime in it, that has the neurotoxin inside of pufferfish in it, and it's just enough of a dosage to put them all to sleep. So Bruce falls asleep, and now he has a dream sequence done by a different artist where he's married to Harley, and Harley immediately wakes up saying, hey Bruce, who's this Julie and Selena and Vicky and Pamela and Talia and Silver? She goes through a whole list of names, including Amanda Connor. And he's like, where'd you get those names? She's like, oh, you talk in your sleep and I dictate in my sleep. So you better tell me who. And he's like, names for our future child. And she's like, oh, that's sweet, but we only got married just a few weeks ago. By the way, Commissioner Gordon called, something about Catwoman stealing some jewels. And he's like, what? Why didn't Alfred pick up the phone? She's like, oh, I fired him. He was going through my drawers. And it's like, yeah, he's a butler. That's his job. So Harley knows about Bruce being Batman. We see them going down the bat poles together. So now Harley's dressed up like Robin. They get to the Batmobile. It's covered in bat shit. And she's like, God, how did Alfred ever keep this thing clean? And he's like, well, we would know if you didn't fire him. So then she opens up the trunk of the Batmobile where Alfred's tied up. And he's like, oh, yes, I used the ShamWow. There's like 50 of them over in the corner. And he says, over in the corner behind the Joker card, to which point Harley freaks out, grabs a shotgun, and blows holes in the Joker card. And Batman's like, okay. I understand that I shouldn't have kept that. That's fine. And she's like, get rid of all your memorabilia. We'll build new things together. And he's like, righto, honey. And he turns to Alfred being like, go ahead and do that, but like keep the really valuable stuff, okay? Just like down in the basement. So they hop in the Batmobile. They drive off. Harley manages to find a little black bat book. And she's like, hey, all those names you were muttering are inside here. And you've given them each a rating in terms of bats out of 5. And Batman is like, hey, I'll explain in a second, but smell this. And he fires off some fireworks spray, to which Harley then goes up out of like the sunroof and is like, wow, look at all the fireworks. And Bruce is hurriedly scribbling in the notebook like, oh, hey, honey, look at this. Look where I put your name. And she's like, oh, 12 bats out of 5? And you wrote next to it, one day I'm going to marry this beautiful girl? That's fantastic. So real world, dream sequence over. Bruce wakes up. He's a hostage of Carp now. And he's like, oh, thank God it was all a dream. And Carp's like, what kind of dream were you having that's better than a hostage situation? And he's like, you don't want to know. So Carp explains, yeah, I'm looking for a ransom. It's $5 million. And Bruce is like, dude, I'm worth like 100 times more than that. And I've been taken hostage plenty of times. Someone's going to pay it. I'm not worried. Just tell me who it is and when they're going to get here. And he's like, oh, well, it's your girlfriend. He's like, I don't have a girlfriend. He's like, well, somebody's claiming to be your girlfriend and said they're going to bring the money. Cut to Harley and Ivy. Ivy is apparently doing the legwork on the computer hacking to figure out where they're located. And he's saying, she basically says, like, I don't want anybody coming with me. This is personal. I need to do this on my own. And everyone else in their gang is like, yeah, all right, cool. We're just going to have a party here. We're just going to drink for a while. And she's like, could you guys at least pretend that you want to come with me? And they're like, oh, no, Harley, please let us come with. And she's like, no. So she runs off. She gets a little extra something from Ivy. She makes her way to the aquarium, and she just can't help but jump into the tank with a beluga whale and give it a hug because it's adorable. I won't lie. We then see Bruce is basically interrogating Carp and Sea Robin, and they're saying like, oh yes, we need that money in order to set up the sanctuary. And Bruce is like, why didn't you guys just like get a grant to do this? And they're like, we applied, but all the people who are running the grants are rich people, and they're the ones who are poisoning the waters to begin with, so nobody would approve it. And Bruce is like, I'm rich. I promise you I'll just do that. Like, it seems like a worthy cause. And they're like, seriously? And it's like, yeah, no, totally. It's like, it seems like good. I'll totally do that, however much you're looking for. And they're like, oh my God, thank you. That's great. We'll let you go. And as they're letting Bruce out, in comes the tear gas. It's Harley. She's got her mallet, and she starts bashing them over the heads. She brings Bruce out, and Bruce is like, what was in that tear gas? That's not normal tear gas. And it's like, oh, no, it's just normal pepper spray and something extra Ivy put in to help put them to sleep. And she's like, right, Ivy, oh God. So at that point, Harley's like, well, hey, you better stay awake on me here because we got a date tonight. And he passes out, and next thing we see is they're out at dinner, and Harley's just explaining her job, what she does. She's a landlord now, and he's like, hey, look, Harley, I had a decent time tonight, like, surprisingly so. We're going to put off the rest of the date, though. Rain check, I promise you I'm good for it. And she's like, yeah, no problem. Absolutely fine. But she does ask for one goodnight kiss, to which Bruce obliges. And she's like, you sure you don't want to ride back home? And Harley's like, nah, don't worry about it. I'm good. So she's now on cloud 9. Like an hour later, she's telling Thony all about it. And as she's up on the rooftop and Thony goes back down, in comes Batman. And Batman's like, oh, you've been busy, Harley. And she's like, what, you arrested me for being on my own property? I can kick you out of here. That's within my rights, you know. And he's like, look, Bruce Wayne, you saved him. So, like, that's kind of cool of you. And, like, we're chill, but I don't trust that you've turned over a new leaf. And she's like, your city's Gotham. I'm here in New York. Just leave me alone. I don't want anything to, like, let me do my own thing. And Batman's like, hey, look, this isn't a warning. I'm just telling you, like, stay on the straight and narrow, you know? And she's like, yeah, whatever. Hey, you saying we're friends now? You're giving me advice? Let me try something. And she plants one on Batman. And Harley's like, that's what I thought. You're nowhere near as good as kissing as Bruce Wayne. Better go get some lessons from him. And Batman flies off, and that's the end of the special. All right. The art sequence for Harley's Dream, I want to get the name of the person who did that. That one was Ben Caldwell. Very stylized. I do like it, though. It really fits with the tone they're going for, so top marks on that. The general art, John Timms, also good. I would say there's a few little places where it gets a little bit iffy for me, but for the most part, it looks fine. The Bruce dream sequence, that one was Aaron Campbell, and that one I think was like the best, just objective style, but I mean, take it or leave it, whether or not you think that's worth the sequence itself. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything else to say. Writing-wise, it's the same as any Harley Quinn book. It's a little bit more fourth wall leaning, just with the idea that the pet beaver literally tells you, and here's the part where we're doing a dream sequence. Like, yeah, okay, thank you, book. I don't really know what more to say about it. If you like that kind of humor, it's going to be right up your alley. If not, you have no reason to read it. It's literally not in continuity. So I'm going to say this one probably is just a flat 7 for me. It's good. It's all right. It's just not anything beyond what I expect from Harley Quinn at this point. Green Lantern Corps number 39, written by Van Jensen, art by Bernard Chang. So last issue, we went to the planet of one of the Green Lantern rookies because her planet's been taken over by like some darkness or something like that. Also, Von Dagel, the Durlin member of the Green Lantern Corps, is off searching for his partner. So this issue picks up with the mother. Her name is Fesca, is talking to her son and basically being like, hey, look, I'm sorry, about how the planet is and all that, but like, it wasn't always this bad. And the son's just like, oh no, but like, it got this bad ever since the demon showed up. And the mom's like, hey, monsters aren't real. Don't worry about it. And he's like, well, what's that then? And points out the window. And then in through the window busts this giant bird-like looking demon. And immediately Lanterns just start throwing constructs at it like crazy. But they keep on coming in. They bust in through the side walls, everything like that. Fesca's mom gets attacked by one of them. And the demon's like, I killed your mom. Your grandma's dead, boy. Soon you will join us. Soon. And as they kill it, they see that, they cause a big Green Lantern explosion. But one of the Green Lanterns, Morrow, the tiny one that doesn't talk much, he gets abducted. And immediately, John is just like, nobody's getting abducted on my watch. And as he goes down to try to find it, they're gone. They're lost in the shadows. So Druk is like, okay, hey, we got to regroup. We got to keep the boys safe. Something's going on here. It's bad. So we then cut over to above the planet Ungara, which is where Von Dagel is, and he's taken the form of a beast to try to get through this weird wilderness area. One other beast comes up and tries to like scare him, so he turns into an even bigger one. It's just like, yeah, that's what I thought. And eventually makes his way into this weird slave mining area. And it's like, oh, well, they're building something. What are they building? And someone yells at him to get back to work, but he's like, I'm not one of your slaves, partner. And they're like, oh, Dagel. So we then go over back to Fesca, who's comforting her son because grandma just got killed right in front of him. It's just like, hey, yeah, no, she's in the wind now. Anytime you feel the wind blow, that's her comforting you. And turns out that they brought them to like an area of worship, something like that. And there's like, yeah, okay, I couldn't think of where else to go. This place my mom used to take me. Oh God. And Druk is like, I'm so sorry. I truly feel for you. So at this point, they're like, okay, we need to figure out where the demons are coming from. And the kid once again raises his hand, is like, we know, or I know. My friends and I, we made a rhyme out of it. In the dark, in the deep, that's where the monsters creep. That's where they're from. Don't ask us how we know that. We just see them. And immediately Fesca's like, he's probably talking about the sewers. We need to go down into the sewer system. So they go down, they find the sewage access, but before they get down there, they are immediately accosted on all sides by Fesca's race. And we see a member of them or someone wearing some sort of mask that says, oh, well, this entire planet has turned against you. Everyone except that boy, and we're really gunning for him. We'd like to add him to the collection. So give us. And they all keep yelling, darkness falls, darkness falls. And as Druk is trying to fight back a few of them, it's just like, look, they want to hurt the boy. We can't let them. John points out, it's not them. It's whatever's controlling them. It's the demons. Well, we got to get down to them. So he makes some giant jackhammer constructs, makes a huge hole underneath them, and they immediately drop down into these caverns underneath the city. Cutting back to Von Dagel, he talks to the partner, and he's like, hey, I've been looking for you for years. What is going on? And she pulls him aside, gets him hidden, and says, like, oh, it's been so long. I didn't realize, like, you were even looking for me. Look, the Guardians kept me here. There was a threat that's even older than the Corps. And this is where we get a bunch of exposition. Apparently there was a thing called the Empire of Tears that the Guardians themselves fought against and repelled them. And they sent them down to live on Yzmalt, and like, that's it. They figured no one's ever going to go there. However, one day a ship was damaged and had to make a crash landing on the planet. Everyone on the ship died except for a young girl. But the young girl was already, just after a few hours, infected by this darkness from the Empire of Tears. Green Lantern Abin Sur showed up, rescued her, took her off planet. But it was a problem because she's infected, so she had a disease and it started spreading across the galaxy. And when they brought here, she'd set up a base. She began doing this thing. She made a thing called the Shadow Empire, and she's been deeply implanted. The partner has been deeply implanted in order to try to figure out what's going on. And she's like, so now that you're here, that means the Guardians are ready to go, right? Like, we're gonna blow this place up. And he's like, dude, the Guardians are dead. They died several story arcs ago. No one is coming. They abandoned us out in deep space. And she's like, what? Then why have I been helping them build all these doomsday weapons if we're just going to let them do it? And it's like, wait, what do you mean doomsday weapons? And it's like, oh, well, they're seeds. They're seeds to spread the darkness. And they step out onto this cliff face, and Von Dagel looks up and he's like, oh God, we have to warn the Corps. We don't see what it is yet. So then we get John and crew going deeper down into these caverns. They seem to be natural, but there's some runes carved in the wall. John asks his ring for a translation. The ring's like, I recognize it, but I can't translate it. It's forbidden by the Guardians. And John's like, why in the hell would that be the case? But as they make their way deeper down, the kid asks for more light because it's scary down here, and Fesca's like, I have a limited charge on my battery. Like, don't worry, we'll be fine. And then all of a sudden, demons start dropping down from the roof. So they start fighting them off. Druk is getting very bloody with them. And he turns to John like, sorry, I know how you feel about me killing things like that. And he's like, nah, man, screw these things. And he pulls out a machine gun construct and just starts gunning them down. He finds a door that they're coming out of, blows it up with a bazooka. And as they walk their way through, it's like, all right, I've had enough of this mystery. Let's get some answers. And then John just looks up and he's like, oh my God, it can't be. And we see on the other side is a giant-ass bomb. And on the other side of this cliff that they're looking up from is other members of Fesca's race saying, I see you recognize this bomb, John Stewart. It's the same one that destroyed a planet that thought you were responsible for. You're going to fail the world for a second time. And that's where it ends. So, here's the thing. I'm not familiar. I'm familiar in passing with John Stewart letting an entire planet die. I know that's a bit of like his character development and a thing that he holds with him since like the Silver Age. I'm down with that. I think it's fine enough characterization, but to then introduce this bomb and say like, aha, you've seen this before. It was the same one, or the same type of bomb at the very least. I'll take your word for it. I have nothing to back that up to say whether or not that's true. It seems like it would be a bigger moment if it was. John's just kind of like, oh no. But like, I'm expecting shock and awe. The other thing is that there's a parallel in the way the art is done of John's face and Von Dagel's face are both like differently colored when they see whatever it is, and then they're both in the same placement on the page wise. So odds are Von Dagel's looking at the same thing, if not many, many more of them. So, yeah, I mean, I'm down for it. Obviously, next issue is the last issue until we get some Green Lantern miniseries in the back half of next year. So, I'm looking forward to seeing how they wrap it up. I think it's been interesting up to this point. Demons are a little bit like, but I think Shadow Empire has been set up for a while now. It was definitely at least in the 5 years later future stuff. Future's End earlier on. So I'm glad that we're at least getting a little bit of rectification on that. So I'm going to give this one, I'll say 7.5. Feels good to me. And we'll see how it all wraps up next time. Justice League 3000, number 14, written by Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis, art by Andy Kuhn. So Last issue, it was a whole thing where they found ice, like the actual ice, Tora from modern day now, has been alive forever, and she's been in a castle, and now they're just like, hey, come on, come check us out, let's go do a thing. And so we open up this issue where there's like a whole parade. Everyone's super stoked to see her walking the streets. And just like, yeah, a lot of people treat you as like a goddess, which I guess you kind of are or whatever. And Superman's there and he's just like, oh yeah, worship's the best. We love when they worship us. And Ice is like, you are so completely different from the Superman I knew back in my day. And he's like, yeah, improvements, right? So at that point, he's basically like, yeah, no, it's a curse to live that long. It's this horrible thing. And she looks around the people staring and she's like, look, you see that they're worshiping me. I see fear. I see anger and contempt. And as they're walking down the street, Ariel and Bruce are watching from on top of a roof. And it's just like, I sent Terry to go and check in on Wonder Woman, and she comes back with an entire parade. Like, what the hell? This is not the Terry I remember. And Bruce is like, well, maybe part of Barry Allen's personality imprinted on her when she became the Flash. And Ariel's like, all right, whatever. Let's get down there. Let's just see what we're dealing with here. Also down on the street, we see Lois Lane and Sinestro are just hiding out in the shadows. Remember, they were brought back to life like 3 issues ago as evil. And Lois is basically like, Sinestro, you're so overeager. You want to jump in and fight them now. But I, Lois Lane, am so much more conniving. And I will do it the same way that we did it 1,000 years ago that led me to killing Superman. And Sinestro's like, if I had my ring, I'd kill him right now. And she's like, yeah, well, you don't have your ring, so we're going to do things my way. And he's like, fine, whatever. So she claims herself to be Lois Lane, queen of the damn universe. Sure. Meanwhile, Ice manages to get back to the rest of the group, and Ariel is basically like, okay, so you say you're immortal and you've just been hiding out in a fortress in demon territory for centuries? And Terry's just like, yeah, all that's true. And she's like, shut up, Terry. Look, tell me your story. Tell me, why are you here now? And Ice is like, well, I mean, Terry here piqued my curiosity. I wanted to see what was up with the Justice League. And it's just like, yes, a likely story, but we have no record of you being in the Justice League. To which Green Lantern points out, like, hey, we don't have any records of anything past like 2500 because of the Great Disaster. And she's like, shut up. Plus, she was a part of Justice League International, which is like the stupid version of the team. Mind you, that's what Superman is saying. And Green Lantern's like, what made it stupid? And it's just like, it had a dwarf on it. That makes it stupid. So at that point, Clark does do the bidding for Ice and just like, look, if she was actually back from back then, like, she would be an invaluable resource. She remembers the heyday, like the universe that we're trying to get back to here. We can get her to help us understand. And Ariel's like, fine, whatever, you want to tell us? And she's like, not really. It's kind of very deep and personal and traumatizing for me. And she's like, yeah, that's what I thought. Not willing to give up any info. And she's like, fine, whatever, I'll tell you, Jesus. So we then very quickly cut over to what's Blue Beetle and Booster Gold doing? Booster Gold wants a cheeseburger. I feel like I could stop there, but the one dude there, the sheriff, is like, oh, well, all we have here is basically the equivalent of Soylent Green, so can't get you a cheeseburger, but I can send you to this place called Cadmus World, where they'll have everything you could ever want, because they're so much better. So, yeah, you'll be safer there. I'll go through this portal. And he just immediately shoves him through a portal. The other fat Blue Beetle's like, thank God they're off our planet. There's a planet's only big enough for one Blue Beetle. And Sheriff's like, maybe not even. And we see that as Booster Gold and Blue Beetle arrive on Cadmus World, they're immediately greeted by other Terry, who goes by the name of Terrence Magnus. Of course, Magnus being a person in modern-day DC as well, so who knows if that's a connection there. But they're immediately greeted by guns, so they're not exactly happy with where they landed. And then we go to Ice's story. So, for some reason, Ice was brought to hell. It was some sort of error, some bureaucratic error, and the Justice League International went down to get her, and because of something that apparently actually happened in continuity, they tried to get her out, but then fire ended up looking back, which made it so that she was trapped there forever. And Eventually, she got out because fire traded places with ice and then sealed the gate behind her. I don't know how much of that was in the issue, but that's what we're saying here. So Ice then tries desperately to get fire out. She can't. Nobody's willing to like put in the effort to do it. So she just forsakes everything. She bails out of the JLI. She leaves. She just like, I'm not a part of this anymore. Terry's like, oh my God, that's horrible. And she's like, yep. And so I went and I made a palace of ice and I just went to sleep and I was like, I'm not going to come back until I think things are better. And then after more than like 100 years, possibly more, all of a sudden the great disaster happened. And she woke up because of it. There was nobody else around. She had no idea what was going on. And as she stumbled around, she came across a young boy who she found she didn't know the name of, and all he could say is Uka Uka. And she's like, hey, young boy, what happened here? Uka Uka. What's your name? Uka Uka. Are there survivors? Uka Uka. And apparently she went at this for weeks trying to impart any sort of language, but ultimately didn't result in anything, so she left. And she heard legends of the last boy on Earth. It's Commandi. Everything in this book is Jack Kirby. So, turns out then there were a bunch of sentient animals. That's a thing in the Commandi series as well. And she just kind of ignored that. She didn't want to do anything with it until eventually she found a cult of remaining humans who were dressed up like bears that worshipped her. And they wanted to be encased in ice to basically cryogenically get to the future. And she's like, all right, well, I did that, but then I decided to go around the world and see what's going on. I wanted to see what the world was up to. Apparently humanity was on a comeback soon afterwards. The Atomic Knights, who went around hunting all the sentient animals, and she was so appalled by what they did, she froze them solid, but then she became a goddess to the animals, and eventually the animals were like, oh, okay, well, we'll do whatever we can. But then the men rose back up again, so she made a space ark and took all of the animals 2 by 2 and just sent them to some other planet where everything was peaceful. But she didn't stay with them, and she eventually made her way to Camelot 9. And they're like, why the hell did you come here? And it's like, it was an uninhabited wasteland when I got here. I thought it'd be fine for me to live out the rest of my days. But nope, wouldn't you know it, I ran into the demon Etrigan who showed up here, and he tried to come after me, and wouldn't you know it, demon Etrigan was the same one who brought me to hell in that earlier part of my story. And immediately Bruce is like, all right, I'm calling BS. This is way too interconnected. Like, there's no way it would be the same demon. What would he be doing out in space? And Ariel's like, that makes sense. And it's like, well, okay, let me continue. I wanted to go back for fire again, even after all these years. And when Etrigan came for me, I used that as my chance. But when I got in there, wouldn't you know it, her and Etrigan were shacking up. They were a thing now. And I was immediately taken apart, and she like pulls down the back of her dress and shows some claw marks that are there. And it's like, and this is what I have to show for it. So she's upset, and she's like, and that's why I hid myself away in the fortress. I never wanted to interact with anybody. That world that I seeked for so long is gone forever. And then Green Lantern's like, but we can make it again. You could tell us how to do that. So let's do that. And then immediately it's just like, by the way, we should probably tell Wonder Woman and Arthur's thing that they need to suit up because Etrigan is definitely going for the ice castle now that ice is not in it. And Flash is just told to immediately run over to Wonder Woman and tell her. So we see that they've already set up at the ice castle, and Wonder Woman's talking to the captain. The captain's just like, so about last night, was that your first time since you woke up? And she's like, no, I've had dozens of lovers, but like, you were pretty good, I guess. And they basically just saying like, hey, you know, we're going to fight, we're going to win, blah, blah, blah. And then Terry runs in just like, hey, you got to be aware that Etrigan's going to be attacking. It's like, yeah, clearly we know. We know how to do battle and war. That's pretty calm for us. And Terry's like, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then we see Etrigan watching all this through a portal. And someone's talking to him saying like, Etrigan, you're going to screw it up. You need my help, Etrigan. Come on. You're going to have to come get me. And he's just like, no, you suck. You were felled by a demon lord. You are not important anymore. And he's like, oh, I will always be important. You must always come and take my advice. And we see inside of Etrigan's lair is the head of Darkseid in a jar. Yeah. And that's it. Yeah. It's all Jack Kirby. It's all Kirby the whole way down, man. All right. Ice's story. It's fine. It's good. It's a fine enough backstory for what I need there. It's kind of weird to me that they went with this is the Commandi timeline. Like, I get they're going for Kirby. It's all Kirby. But, like, the fact that this is the Commandi timeline means that, like, 500 years pass. All of the Commandi stuff happens. Like, the world falls into sentient animals. And then somehow Earth manages to get back to the point where it's the planet that Booster Gold and Blue Beetle were on, where it's like New York City is still just totally fine. Like, that's kind of weird to me. A lot can happen in 500 years, don't get me wrong, but that's kind of weird to me. Beyond that, everything else is just kind of whatever. There's so many little things to bring up, but ultimately, like, it's just kind of fine. I don't know how best to describe it. It's just kind of, it feels like for so long this book wasn't doing anything, and then all of a sudden in one issue it's just like, and here's our entire thesis statement. Here's everything we're doing all at once. And it's like one issue until we're going to have to take a break, and it's going to come back as Justice League 3001, you know? So I'm going to say this one overall 7.5. No, 7. It's just 7. I don't know. It's such a weird book to me because there are parts of it that I'm like, that's super interesting. And then there are other parts that I'm like, this is a joke. All of this is to be played off as a joke. So, yeah, 7. Justice League United number 9, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Neil Edwards. So last issue, Infinitus has come to full fruition in the past, where everything else is happening currently now, and then Supergirl flew into a portal to try to stop Bith and Ultra, but she got caught up in that. So this one picks up, everyone's staring down Infinitus, they're like, oh god, we failed, it's all done for, and the Legion's just like, no, as long as there's a Legionnaire, we will fight, and so like 40 of them all fly in to fight Infinitus. We see that one of them, Dream Girl, calls up Brainiac 5 and is just like, hey man, do we have a plan? Do we have anything to take this guy out? And he's like, well, sorta, kinda, and then we see Sardath in the background. It's like, we? And he's like, yes, okay, fine, whatever. We came up with this thing. I'm thinking it might end up working. And apparently he's like debating whether to call it the Infinity Bomb or the Infinitus Solution. And Dreamgirl's like, I swear to God, man, if you don't focus up and tell me what the hell's going on, I am going to end you. And he's like, all right, sorry, geez. It's a big bomb that should trap Infinitus into a self-repeating loop of the Big Bang outside of time and space. I didn't have the ability to do it in the future because we lost Zeta Beam technology, but I can make it work here. And Dreamgirl's like, cool, do it. So at that point, Martian Manhunter and Stargirl wonder what Supergirl's up to. We cut over to her. She's flying through a portal and just like, Bith, you bastard, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. And he's just like, it doesn't matter. I am about to reshape the entire universe. And it's like, yeah, you guys always say that. You're all crazy and it never works out. And he's like, oh, yes, maybe I'm crazy, but I have access to a literal god over there. So who's crazy now? And as Supergirl is trying to fight against him, Bith literally says, like, why are you fighting? We are both outsiders. You could be my queen. And she punches him in the face and be like, I'm 16, you creep. So he transforms into his true form, which is basically just a collection of limbs and a sarlacc pit for a center of his face. And he's like, oh, I've never shown this to anybody in millennia or whatever. So everyone's still fighting against the wraiths that Infinitus summons, and it's like, oh no, they're getting by. They're headed down to Thanagar. We have to stop them. And so Martian Manhunter and a couple of Legionnaires just set up this whole little crew of like, okay, we'll go down there, we'll stop them. So they teleport down there. We see, oh god, I don't know, Element Lad, Wildfire, some of them that's magic, White Witch, and they're all fighting against the Wraiths. And eventually Element Lad turns them into all the Wraiths into a crystal form that then he calls on Bouncing Boy to do his job. And Animal Man's like, Bouncing Boy, seriously? To which point he then goes boom, 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 and hits them all and shatters them all. And he's like, yeah, really? And then Wildfire gets hit and his suit implodes and like his electrical energy, whatever, just empties out of the suit. And everyone's like, oh no! But that happens like every 3 weeks, so we don't really care. We then see Polar Boy and, I don't know, a Fire One. And they're just like, oh, we got to keep going. We got to do what we can. And then Stargirl's asking Equinox, like, hey, how can you make ice in the vacuum of space? And she just kind of shrugs her shoulders and be like, I just got these powers. I don't know. So Hawkman's fighting against Martian Manhunter, and Manhunter's just like, I'm going to reach into your brain and show you that you were brainwashed. And he does. And Hawkman's like, oh, God, I was brainwashed. And he's like, yeah, don't worry about it. You're good now. So then all of a sudden, Brainiac 5 ship shows up, and he's like, okay, we made the bomb, but we have to fire it via conventional missile because we can't teleport it into him directly because of all the weird space-time shenanigans. And Martian Manhunter's like, you can't fire the bomb yet. Supergirl's in there with them. We got to get her out first. And Brainiac 5's like, I will give you as much time as humanly possible, but for the love of God, I am doing this to save literally all of creation. So at that point, rest of the group, a couple other members are just like, oh, what are we going to do? How can we got to go in there. And Hawkman's like, I'm going to kill Biff. He's a bastard. So Mon-El has an idea, and I couldn't even begin to tell you what it is. But regardless, Supergirl's trying to punch and do whatever to Biff, but because he's a shapeshifter, punching doesn't really work. And he's like, I've been around for the death of everything. I am literally chaos incarnate. I watched Krypton die. And then Hawkman comes in and be like, didn't see this coming, did ya? And smacks him in the head with his mace. And as Biff captures Hawkman, he's like, did you really expect that to work? And he's like, nope, I expected it to be a distraction. And in comes Gates from the Legion, whose power is he can make portals to teleport people out. And he teleports out, he makes a portal for Colossal Boy's fist to reach in, grab hold of Biff, and just like hold him up. And then Phantom Lass, or girl, or whatever her name is, puts her hand through Biff's brain and says, like, if I make my hand solid, your brain will explode. You want to surrender? And so he does. So at that point, Martian Manhunter goes over to where Ultra is, and he's just like, hey, Ultra, you got to stop doing this. And Ultra's like, why? I mean, look, I've aged pretty much as far as I'm going to here. Biff was an idiot. He thought he could control me, but like, I do have actual god powers. I am Infinitus. And we see his mental representation of himself changes into Infinitus. Brainiac 5's like, all right, I'm firing the gun. And everyone's like, no, hold on, just give it a minute. He's like, no, we are out of time. In order to save all the universe, I'm doing this. And we see Martian Manhunter just talking to Ultra, and it's just like, oh, Ultra, look, I'm so sorry. And he's like, why? Why would you be sorry? I'm a god. This is kind of the best possible situation for me. And he's like, no, I'm sorry because you let me into your mind, which means you still somewhat trust me. And I'm sorry I have to abuse that trust. And he reaches out and breaks Ultra's mind, just shatters it into a million pieces. And Infinitus starts to implode in on himself. And everyone's like, yeah, he did it. And he comes out through a portal holding Ultra's body. And Ultra's just like babbling away. And Stargirl's like, so what happened in there? He's like, I did what I had to do. Let's not talk about it anymore. But then in comes Brainiac. Brainiac 5 comes in and he says, hey, guys. Remember that bomb I made? I fired it. And it would have been fine if it were able to collide with Infinitus, but there's no Infinitus anymore. So instead it makes a giant black hole. And we see the Legion and the Justice League United all swirling around this black hole, because of course nothing can be easy. Alright, I just want to a little critique there at the ending. Everyone got out of the portal. Like, that happened. Martian Manhunter was the only one who stayed behind, and it was just to try to talk down Ultra. So assuming that this bomb actually would have worked, if he had just left and not mind-broken Ultra, there would be no issue here. It's only because he took that extra step to literally break his own moral code and, like, mind-break this child that there's now bigger issues. Just a little thing plot-wise where it's like, that doesn't seem to fit together, but, you know, you gotta have a big ending. So, yeah, they're fighting against a black hole, whatever. I mean, all the rest of it's what... I will say I appreciate this issue a little bit more than the last two, where it feels like it specifically points out a couple of Legionnaires and tells us specifically, here's their power set, here's their name, you will not need to know them past this page. That's fine. I'm good with that. It was the past 2 issues where you're just throwing fists of them at me and saying, like, you better learn who they are now, because you're going to be lost without it. That's where I had a problem. This one, art's fine, writing's fine, except a little bit there at the end, but, you know, you got to have another thing happen, I guess. So I'm going to give this one... I'll give it a 7.5. It doesn't quite hit that 8 for me. It's close, but it's just missing something, or too many characters. Take your pick. World's Finest, number 31, written by Paul Levitz, art by Jed Dougherty. We are almost done with the origins of Superman and Batman on Earth 2, but this issue picks up with the first strike, the Doomsday, whatever you want to call it. It apparently starts with all of the satellites on Earth falling out of the sky. And as we discover very soon afterwards, they're not just falling, they are being targeted at major cities. So we see we're in Metropolis, Lois Lane is on the ground, her narration saying, like, this was going to be my last great scoop, but I didn't know it at the time. And we see her watching, like, all these satellites come down, and people are screaming, dead in the streets, and she's like, oh God, but where's my Wonder? Where's Clark? And then right then, as a satellite's about to smash another building, he comes in, punches the satellite out of here, and it's just like, finally, he's here. And he goes through, and he's just saving people left and right. It's like second nature to him, but it's not just an up-in-the-air thing. We got to be working hard down on the ground, too. So Lois tackles a fireman out of the way of some debris, and she's like, oh, you're in the wrong place. And he's like, honey, look around. There's no right place here. So she tries taking a message from the fireman, like, do you know why the satellites were falling out of the air? And he's like, no, I have work to do, bye. So she looks up, sees Superman. He's literally like soldering steel to buildings to try to hold them up as they are coming down. And as he's doing so, he sees like a giant tower coming off the top of one of them, and he just heat visions the whole thing to the point of like dissipating without it even hitting the ground. And she's like, I've never seen him fly so hard, so much, but like ultimately this is too much even for him, because as he looks out, he sees a few civilians he's too busy with other stuff. There's no way he's going to be able to save them before they fall. In comes Batplane. Batman comes to help and just like, yep, well, we've got other wonders up there, and like I said, we're helping down here as well. Meanwhile, over in Gotham, she says Gotham didn't get hit nearly as hard, but it's still an issue. We see Catwoman and Robin are letting a few civilians who are up in one of these weird-ass cathedral-looking things down on a rope. And the woman's just like, why is this happening? And Robin's like, the why is for later. Right now it's just getting you safe. So they see a few more satellites coming down, seemingly aimed directly at them. And then in comes Superman, who just bashes a few of them. And it's like, oh, okay, it's all right. Superman's here. So as they get down to the ground, pieces of rubble start coming down off the building. Catwoman shields Robin. It's fine, though. She just tanks the hits. And as she starts running away from the building, we see more and more rubble coming down, including a giant-ass statue that's about to land on top of them. But then in comes the blue blur again, and it saves them from the statue. And Robin's like, Superman came back. And we see, as the audience, though it's questionable how much they saw, it's not Superman, it's Supergirl. Supergirl is the one flying around here. And narration says Selina knew, Catwoman knew, Bruce couldn't keep a secret from her, no one can keep a secret from Bruce. So at that point, Supergirl is just going around trying to help as much as possible. And then Catwoman's like, those satellites seemed a little bit too targeted directly onto us. That's suspicious. So Superman's sitting on the Batplane talking to Batman, just like, okay, what do we do? And Batman's like, it's a weird pattern. It's only hitting cities. It might be hitting people where our specific loved ones are. We got to go up into space and catch whoever is in the act of doing this. Go do that. I'm going to do my own thing. And so Superman flies up to do that. We then see Lois down on the ground interviewing some random guy who's like, oh, so can you tell me where you were when the satellites hit? And he's just like, oh, well, I was just sitting at my desk and a big piece of metal landed on my desk and I was like, wham, that's crazy. And she's like, oh, right, so, hey, you want to be on TV? I want to interview you. And he's like, oh, wow, that's fantastic. Thanks, Miss Lane. So we see Supergirl makes her way back to the secret island that she lives on. And she's just humming a little ditty to herself when all of a sudden, in comes that lady, Indris, I think her name is. I don't know. And she zaps Supergirl, just being like, wait a minute, who are you? You're not the mortal I was sent here to kill. And she's like, you don't know who I am? That's a big mistake. And she's like, I've heard about you from Clark. You're this lady who keeps showing up. I'm gonna teach you a lesson. And she's just like, screw that, blasts Supergirl again, and then just goes through a boom tube. Just like, I don't have time for this. So we then go over to Batman, who's breaking into the home of Terry Sloan because he's like, I don't trust him after the last issue, and this clearly has his fingerprints on it. So Batman breaks in, he goes to a vault, and he does like a scan on it, like, I might be able to break in, and he just puts a stick of dynamite on it and blows it up. And inside is a glowing chunk of kryptonite, which immediately some guards find Batman, he kicks him out, takes the kryptonite, and gets out entirely. And as Terry is looking over the damage the next morning, he's like, well, that's to be expected. And he looks over at his compatriot. He's like, so Batman took the bait, but he didn't find the real prize, right? And it's like, nope, he's still sound asleep. Thus mentioning the fact that Terry Sloan has Val-Zod literally in his basement. So we then go to Lois one more time, trying to walk this man into the Daily Planet. And security guard's like, hold on there, Miss Lane. We haven't cleared this place. It might be structurally unsound. And Lois pulls out an all-access pass and says, like, I'm sorry, can you read? What does that name say? Where does it say I can go? That's right, Lois Lane, anywhere, anytime. And I'm going into that building. And she does, to which the narration says, and that was the dumbest thing I ever did. So, yeah. It's fine. I mean, here's the weird thing about Earth 2, specifically for this show, is that I know all of this. Like, they have covered the early days of Earth 2, not only in the Earth 2 book itself, several times from several different vantage points, but also in World's Finest, back when it was Kara and Helena. Like, when they were talking about, like, oh yeah, remember when we were kids? Remember the day that it all went wrong? Like, yes, I've seen this. Not maybe from this exact perspective, like, but I know that Lois dies here, because they've said that numerous times of Lois Lane died on the first day when it all started happening. Like, that was the problem. So, I don't know, it's just seeing the same thing over and over again. You know, like, they're showing a couple different vantage points of it, but ultimately I'm not getting anything new out of it. So then I have to question, is it worth my time? And the answer is I don't get to choose what I do with my time, but regardless, it's kind of not worth my time. Overall, though, I think this one is probably just going to be like 6.5 for me. I think that if this issue were lumped into whatever the next issue is going to be, collectively it could have been like 7.5. But there just wasn't enough in this specific issue to get it up to that point. So I'll give it a 6.5 and just say that's enough. New Suicide Squad number 7, written by Sean Ryan, art by Tom Derenick and Rob Hunter. So last issue, we had the crew blowing up a Chinese superhuman clone factory, and then there was one final guy who managed to survive, and he is very, very pissed. So this issue opens up with Deadshot, who's still in recovery. He's trying to train at the firing range, but something's keeping him from pulling the trigger, and he's very upset by that. Meanwhile, we find the clone later on. I'm not sure he ever gets a name. I'm just going to keep calling him the clone. He's flying around, but he loses control of his flight. He crash lands in a field. And as he's looking around at himself, he has like a heads-up display of like not only his own vitals, but also like stuff in the surroundings. And he's like, okay, I'm getting this together. And he stands up and he looks super determined. Meanwhile, Captain Boomerang's looking out the rearview mirror of the van, and he's like, yeah, there was a clone, it crashed into a field, so I don't know, I guess he sucks. And like, okay, and how's Reverse Flash? He also sucks, because he's just so whiny about how his knee blew out. And just like, all right, so what's the plan here? And Blanta says, look, China builds a lot of developments that not a lot of people move into. We've got a ghost town up ahead. We're just going to go and chill out there. Also, they sometimes base these ghost towns off of Western cities that already exist, so it might be a bit familiar. And as we approach it, we see it's Metropolis. It's got the Daily Planet globe. It's Metropolis. So As they approach, the Waller's asking for an update, and Manta's like, yeah, one clone survived, but we blew up the whole place. Overall, I'd say mission success. And she's like, yeah, you'd say wrong, buddy. I said kill them all. You got one more. And he's like, well, it survived a giant explosion, so I don't think that's possible. And she's like, figure it out. Also has Reverse Flash. And they're like, he sucks. He's useless. And Reverse Flash is like, come on, guys, please. I'm in pain here. So at that point, Manta says, everyone shut up. It's outside. No one make a sound. And we see it looking down at the exact spot where they're holed up in, and it can hear just the ever so tiniest breathing, to which point it squints, and Manta's like, ah, damn it. So it comes busting in through the wall. Immediately, people start scattering. Reverse Flash is like, Harley, please, don't leave me. And she's like, oh, fine. So she picks up Reverse Flash. Meanwhile, a Man-Bat comes swooping in to fight against the clone, and Manta's like, I didn't sign up for all this, man. And Boomerang's like, hold up, what do you mean signed up for? And just to continue that plot for a second, they get held down in a corner, and Manta's like, yeah, during Forever Evil, I thought Aquaman was dead, and it ruined me. So I needed something to do. And Boomerang's like, you ever heard of golf? Literally anything else than this? And he's like, yeah, well, I wanted to pick something where I could kill Aquaman over and over and over again without actually killing Aquaman. And we see flashbacks to him on these missions where he's picturing all the people he's killing as Aquaman, and it just does something for him. And Boomerang's like, Jesus, man, you need a shrink or something. So we see the Man-Bat fighting against the clone, and somehow they're able to speak in some language. It's not English, it might be Chinese, but regardless, the Man-Bat's basically like, I'm under control, I am raised to kill, I am nothing but a bullet to be fired, and I will kill you. And the clone is just like, no one kills me, no one does, and he throws down Man-Bat and mortally injures him. And then finally there's the Harley Reverse Flash plot, which is basically just Harley ends up dropping Reverse Flash, being like, nah, man, screw you, I'm done. And he's like, oh, wait, you wouldn't leave me here to die? And she's like, clearly you don't know me. And he's like, well, I thought you and the Joker broke up. Why are you still wearing clown makeup and killing people? Isn't that his whole thing? And she's just like, oh, hell no. Enjoy dying. So we then go over to the Man-Bat, and as the clone is about to lay a finishing blow, saying, just repeating over and over, like, no one kills me, no one kills me, he gets slower and he says, like, no one kills. His head starts hurting, he hears some voices. Amanda Waller just blows up the Man-Bat's head. He's like, beep, he's dead. So that freaks out the clone. He's pissed off about that. Manta and Boomerang are like, what the hell is this guy's problem? What is he doing? And we see that he feels there's too much death. He saw all those clones die, and he says no one kills, no one else dies. And as he lands back on the ground, he sees an entire row of Chinese tanks rolling up to him, and out pops some scientists, and they're just like, can we control him? And it's like, yes, sir. And they press a button on a tablet, and he immediately starts screaming about voices in his head. And he flies up in the air, yelling about him, and he rips off his headpiece to his costume. And he's like, the voices are gone. To which point the generals there are just like, well, we lost control. Nuke them. And everyone just starts firing their tanks at him, just simultaneously. Huge artillery barrage that sends the clone flying into the fake Daily Planet building. And as that is happening, we see some rubble coming down from the Daily Planet building, including the giant globe, and it starts coming down exactly on top of where Harley is. And everyone's like, well, she's done for, and Reverse Flash says good riddance. So I doubt they kill Harley Quinn. Just my guess. Just my 2 cents being thrown into the ring there. I like the clone. I like the character. I think he's not going to live. There's no way he's coming out of this with any sort of characterization or anything. But honest to God, he barely speaks for like 5 panels, or not panels, pages. And what he does say is so very fragmented and broken up. He's very clearly not got this full grasp on life. But I really like the way that they immediately have him kind of just get like, maybe not the Superman mindset, but at the very least the Batman of just like, no killing, no death. Like, that is what I'm standing for here. And I like that from a character standpoint. Ultimately, though, he's definitely going to die. So, yeah. I don't really care much about the Black Manta seeing Aquaman and all the stuff. Like, it's a messed up visual to see Aquaman getting his head literally blown out the back. But, like, for once you accept like, yeah, it's just a dream sequence, whatever, it just kind of feels like shock value, you know? So overall, I'm going to put this one at I'll give it a 7.5. I think I enjoyed enough for that. It's not quite at the 8 territory, but I think the only thing I could do to get it there is you needed to lean more in on the tragic story of this clone. And maybe we'll get there next issue, but I wanted more of that here. Secret 6, number 2, written by Gail, Simone, art by Ken Lashley. So last issue, we left off with the 7, as we find out Ventriloquist has her puppet with her, are being asked the question, what is the secret? And one of them will be killed if they are not given an answer. So we open up this issue with Catman 18 months ago, and he's brought before this mysterious person, very much a psychopath, who's like, oh, looks like you've had some issues there. Welcome to Project Mockingbird. And he reaches out to like touch Catman's face, and Catman just bites off his fingers, and like they're punching him in the head to get him to stop. And ultimately he's like, oh, you are a little bastard, you are. But you know what? This is just the beginning of our fun, so I'm going to show you to your room. And they drag Catman into this cell, toss him inside. It's like, not even a cell, it's like a cave, pretty much, with just bars on the door. And they say, I'm going to let you out in exactly 1 year. Have fun, Catman. So we cut to now. We see Big Shot is looking at Catman, who is freaking out because not only are they trapped in this cell, but the cell is clearly underwater as well. And he's just like, I'm not good at enclosed spaces or stuff like that. So yes, we need to get out of here. And he's just like, I get it. Don't worry. We'll be fine. He's like, what makes you think that? So timer says they've only got 1 minute left. They got to give an answer. Ferdy, the name of ventriloquist puppet, comes up just being like, well, if we got to kill somebody, I hope it's Mr. Panic Attack here. And it's like, don't listen to her, Blake. Just deal with it. And Catman's just not okay. He's just like breaking down. Flashback, 1 month in captivity. We see the strange man is just like, well, you know, it's been a month, but I brought some food for you. That's something, right? And Catman launches as fast as he can, grabs this guy by the throat through the bars in the door, and he's like, hoo-hoo, those are some good reflexes. But here's the thing, I'm the only one who knows you're in here. So if you kill me, you're going to stay locked in here, and you're not going to be getting any more food for the rest of the time. Got it? And Catman's just like, he's frozen for a second, but ultimately releases the guy's throat. And he's just like, there you go. Don't worry, I'm not angry. I get it. But you do still need to be punished. So he turns on the sprinklers in the cell and has them run for a couple days at a time with no defense from that. So immediately Catman's like, I can't be wet and I can't be in a box. Those are my two things, and yet I am both of those things. So Strix at that point writes a note saying like, I feel bad for him, maybe we should kill him. And it's like, and Big Shot's like, look, I know you mean well, but let's just put a pin in that. And does anybody know what the secret is? Anyone have any idea here? And Porcelain pulls up like, well, there's a reason that the 6 of us are in this box. And Ferdy's like, 7. It's like, no, 6. Like, have any of us ever met before or anything like that? And Ventriloquist is like, oh, I meet so many people at parties. So at that point, they've wasted time. Voice comes back on. All right, time has elapsed. You didn't answer the question. One of you has to die. So pick whoever it's going to be. And Big Shot's like, all right, look, I'm starting to get a little bit pissed off here. We're not going to eliminate anybody. We're going to work together on this one. And immediately Ventriloquist and Ferdy are just like, we vote Catman. Catman's clearly crazy, and he's a detriment to us all. And Catman's like, oh, is that how it's going to be, Big Shot? And Big Shot's like, hey, no, that's not what it is. But he's approaching Catman. Catman just punches him in the face. To which point, Ferdy goes separate from Ventriloquist, starts walking around on his own. To which point, Catman's like, wait a minute, you're controlling him? And she's like, yeah, I'm just that talented. And he's like, no, you're telekinetic. You can move stuff with your mind. Can you move this box, this cell we're in, up out of the water? And she's like, I might be able to if you give me a kiss. And he's like, what? And she's like, yeah, just give me a kiss. Make that happen. And Ferdy's like, oh, I oughta. And he's like, fine, yeah, sure, whatever. So they kiss, and Ferdy's like, all right, well, you don't got to slip tongue into it, you know. So then we cut to 30 weeks in captivity, and we see a woman approaches Catman's cell, and she's like, hey, I feel bad for you. He doesn't even watch the monitors anymore. You've got a little over halfway left to go. I brought you something, and I'm hoping that it'll help you get through this, but please do not mention it was me who brought it to you. And he unwraps the thing, and it's a little kitten. And the kitten goes meow, and he's like, oh my god, thank you so much. I've got a kitten. So at that point, Black Alice starts getting electrocuted nonstop. And Catman's like, she's dying. They've chosen her because we didn't choose. You have to do something, Ventrilo, you got to lift us up. Please, she's just a kid. And she's like, oh, I'll try. So up above, we see like an oil rig sort of situation with a bunch of military types inside, just saying like, oh, we've lost power on the box. Feeds have cut out. And it's just like, oh, it's probably just a glitch. Don't worry. They're going to be dead soon anyway. And we see as everyone else is standing around with like guns and stuff, very clearly paramilitary. They look over the edge of the bunker, and up out of the water comes this cell. Back to the captivity. 1 year in, the intercom pops over. It's the guy again saying like, hey, door's unlocked. You're free. Happy birthday. And by the way, I know about the cat. Don't worry. I'm not going to hurt the cat. I would never hurt an innocent animal. But I did kill the woman. And he's like, I don't believe you. I know you're lying. And if I ever do end up finding you, you will never be able to, like, no hole will be deep enough. And he's like, all right, well, have a nice day. So we see Porcelain is using her powers to break through the wall as best she can. And as it's almost all the way through, she looks over at Catman being like, hey, Catman, you want out? There's the door. And he just busts through this solid concrete and immediately starts attacking all the guys with guns. And he's like tanking bullets too. To which point, Porcelain and Ventriloquist are just like, damn, he is like all sorts of pure man. And Ferdy's like, I don't like this guy. So at that point, Big Shot's carrying out Black Alice, just like, hey, don't worry, we got you. You're going to be fine. And she's like, no one's ever cared about me before. It's really nice. So everyone starts fighting against this paramilitary group. Strix is in on it. Catman's in on it. Eventually, one of them gets the drop on Big Shot, and he's like, I will kill both you, man. Do not make a move. And Black Alice is like, hey, don't worry about it. I got this. And she says, gone, gone, form of maid. Arise the demon. Has conveyed. So she's got a demon-like Etrigan in her, but it's the female version. And she just starts absolutely ripping apart all of these people. The intercom's coming over saying, this will not be tolerated. Return to the box. The guilty must be punished. And it reveals that 2 years ago, one of them killed an innocent young woman. They only want to punish that one person. That one has to die, and the rest of them can live. Or they will all die. So that's what it is. And Catman and crew all look at each other, and they're just like, I just want to check. Are we all together in this? And everyone just like nods, and Catman's like, cool. All right. You made a mistake, like whoever you are, because we are not the Justice League. We are messed up individuals. So here's the counteroffer. We are done hiding. You can come and find us and try to take us, but we will burn you down and piss on the ashes. And that's where it ends. All right. Obvious thing up front, this issue was delayed severely. There was like 2 to 3 months between this and the first issue. I did have to go back and reread the first issue to be able to remember everything that happened. Fair enough. It's going to happen. It's a little bit sucks that it happens on the second issue, but, unavoidable. As for the issue itself, I love the explanation here that all of Catman's traumas that we were seeing of his claustrophobia and his fear of being wet is literally linked to just this captivity thing. If we have this sort of thing for all of the other different characters, or even if we just focus on Catman, I'd be so down for that. I think that they've built an interesting team here with their own little quirks and eccentricities. I'm super into it. So overall, art style, great. Writing, great. I think this is a fantastic series. After 2 issues, I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest goes. I'm going to give this one I'm going to say 8.5. I think it's an 8, but then that reveal of the demon, reveal of Hazendas, whatever, Hesh conveyed. That's it. That's going to take some time to remember. That boosted up that extra 0.5. So yeah, I'm really enjoying Secret 6, and I hope it keeps up this pace. Constantine number 22, written by Ray Fawkes, art by Jeremy Haun. So last issue, Constantine killed Constantine. Our Constantine killed Earth 2 Constantine, and his family and friends from Earth 2 were not too happy about it, despite the fact it seems that they were able to start teleporting their way off planet. We pick up with, I think it's Midge? I don't know. I lost track of some of the characters here, but regardless, the girlfriend of Constantine is choking out Constantine as the spell starts going off, and Constantine's like, I have so much raw power going on in me right now, like, I'm just going to let her do this for as long as she needs to. Maureen, that's her name. So all of a sudden the power explodes, gravity starts to unravel, all the sigils start firing off, and all it's waiting for is John to say the magic word. And he does. It's some glyphs, I can't translate it, to which Dr. Fate sees the glowing bubble of magical energy as he's fighting off parademons outside, and he's like, Constantine, you idiot. You are crazy to open up a gate that size, because it's not just his like family and friends he's saving. He's saving like most of Lower London. And he's like, you thought you could do this alone? Not without fate on your side. And that's not a helpful advice. That is a threat. So immediately we see all of these little discs of light forming, and we see multiple different people are being carried out on these discs of light. And he's like, see, I told you this is going to work. We just got to do this. And he's actually kind of proud of himself. He's like, I might actually care about these people that I'm trying to save here. And as he says that, he gets a glimpse back to that void with the eyes staring back at him, saying like, oh, care for nothing, hope for nothing. I see you. And immediately, Chaz starts freaking out. He's like, oh, I can't handle this. It's too much. And Constantine's like, hey, you're stronger than you know, man. I know you. And Chaz just punches him across the face, being like, you don't know me. You killed the version of me, or that knew me. And once again, Maureen goes for the throat of like, I'm going to choke him again. And he's like, all right, look, I've had enough of this. I need to focus on the spell, or else all of us are going to die. So he just like forces everyone down to their knees. And he's just like, yeah, let me do this. And Maureen's like, who cares? Yeah, I don't want to live in a world without Constantine. You killed him. How dare you? And Chaz is like, oh, you're not our John. You let him die. And immediately he says, like, you stabbed him in the back. And he's like, it wasn't in the back. And if you guys think I'm the devil, I got something to show you. And they start teleporting to different realms, different levels of reality, and they end up starting at heaven. And heaven is under attack by parademons, and the doors are closed. And they recognize that. They're like, what? How can heaven, what? And it's like, yeah, they closed the doors to stop like the enemy from coming in, and all those souls outside, they're going to be consumed by the enemy. You guys think I'm the devil? That's heaven. That sucks. So as they're staring down at heaven, the plate that they're standing on starts getting pierced by little ankh-shaped hooks. And it's all coming from Dr. Fate, basically saying like, you think you can be a trickster to me? You think you can play that game? Nah, man, I ain't letting that happen. So the hooks start going into the backs of each of the people. And he's like, you've opened the way, but you will not navigate without the power of fate. And if you deny me, I will keep you to this place between spaces. And Constantine tries telling him off, and as he rips out the hook from his back. Maureen and Chaz also get free, but Constantine's parents are being dragged by the hooks off of the plate. Constantine gets to his dad, manages to unhook him as Maureen and Chaz try to do the same for the mom, but ultimately they can't do it in time, and the mom gets pulled off the plate down into the space between spaces. And Constantine's like, oh God, why does this keep happening? God, Mom. And we see as everyone is like so broken up over the fact that she just basically died, Constantine notices the void again and the eyes staring back, saying, hope for nothing, care for nothing, there's no escape. And we see the dad breaking down, just being like, you brought this on us. You were never our son. Our son is dead now because of you, and you just killed the love of my life. And he starts like sobbing, and Constantine's just like, yeah, you know what? Fine. Yes, she's dead. She's gone. She's trapped out there, and I'm going to make sure you live. I'm going to make sure that all of these people live. So maybe, you know what? I promise you I will come back and I'll save her. If there's any way to do it, I will find it. And then all of a sudden they start slipping again. They end up in the green, and they see all these plant monsters fighting against parademons, and they pull out guns because the green starts like coming after them, start attacking them, thinking it's also them invading. And as they do so, John's dad aims the gun at Constantine. And he's like, I should just shoot you now, you lying bastard. And he's like, for the love of God, I do not understand that it's more than just us. Like, I am trying to save all of these people here. I'm just going to keep us going. And they start picking up the pace. They start moving through realms faster. Next one they end up in is the Rot, also being attacked by parademons. And Constantine, he still has the gun trained at his head by his dad. And he's like, look, point that gun wherever you like, but if you kill me, you kill every single one of these other people who did nothing wrong. If you want to kill yourself so badly, go ahead and do it yourself. And he's like, you know what? Fine, I will. And he walks away. He walks over to the edge of the disc, and he takes 1 foot step off of it, and he's ready to plummet. But Constantine grabs him and says, like, no, stop. I promise. I told you I would rescue her, and I will. And he's like, you're lying. You're a liar. You'll say anything. And he's like, I am a liar. I'm not lying right now. So they move again, before they move into the next realm, once again the void hits John. And he realizes that the void is able to see him. He's like, I can see you. I will unmake you. Nothing escapes me. Nothing escapes my hatred. And Constantine's like, ah, crap. You can see me, can't you? You're a god. You are a literal god, and you are now able to see me. Well, better get a move on. So they move into the next realm. And the next one's the Red, a whole bunch of animals and stuff, but they're zooming now. They're moving through super quick. There's nothing else they could do. They eventually move into a realm of astral thought, where it's just anything can be, and there is a single flame of creation in this realm that is also being attacked by parademons. And Constantine says, they're trying to destroy the flame that burns all of the souls in this universe. That's like, they're trying to like snuff out life itself. And once again, the eyes, they're blood red, and it's just like, oh, your name is Constantine. I'm coming. And finally, they reach their limit. They get out of the astral area, and they are now back on Earth Zero, or outside in space. They're looking at it, and it's like, there, I did it. No fire pits, no apocalypse. I did it. And then this booming voice comes out from behind. This giant hand through a portal says, John Constantine, I'm coming for you. And immediately Constantine's like, ah, crap. He can cross over too. He can follow us. And Constantine realizes this is the hand of Darkseid himself. All that void, the eyes he was seeing, that was Darkseid, recognizing that Constantine was moving into a place outside of his reach, into a new universe. So he literally reached out and follows here, and he says, what universe is this? And he's like, I just brought Darkseid back to Earth Zero. He could kill us all now. He hasn't enough power to do that. And like, this is a problem. So Constantine breaks the spell for a couple dozen of the people that he was trying to save, hoping that that's enough, hoping he can bring up a little bit more magic stuff. But he realizes the only way he's going to be able to do this if he manages to pull a con on Darkseid himself. So harnessing as much magical power as he can, he stands up and he says, all right, one last trick. And that leads us into the final issue. I gotta say, this Earth 2 bit's been a little bit up and down for me. It really, really started strong. I love the way that it was going. The middle bits, like last issue and the issue before, were a little bit weaker, but I think ultimately still had some cool stuff to it. I love the way this is ending. I don't know, it feels so like corny in a lot of ways, of like, yeah, Constantine has to pull one over on God itself, but at the same point, the fact that it's not capital G God, but is instead Darkseid, and we're tying it all in with this Earth 2 stuff, as much as you may be sick of the Earth 2 stuff, like, it works. Like, I want to see how Constantine can manage to pull this off, you know? So all in all, I'm invested. I'm hoping that they're not going to drop the ball in the last issue. I'm hoping that whatever trick he tries to pull on Darkseid here during the Earth 2 World's End, like, maybe it'll work. Maybe that's like part of the major storyline factor of what makes Earth 2's World's End be what it is, or Convergence even. I don't know, but I'm curious to see. So I'm going to give this one honestly, I think I'm going to give it an 8. I think there's enough moments in this to get me all the way up to an 8 on this. So definitely enjoying it. Looking forward to the rest. Klarion number 5, written by Nocenti, art by Trevor McCarthy and Szymon Kudranski. So last issue ended with Klarion taking some tech from a guy named Swag inside of his own pocket dimension, and I just couldn't care less. So this issue opens up with Zell basically saying, "Hey Klarion, you sure you should be taking that? We had literally just had a thing where our friend took part robot and that didn't work out so well." And he's like, "Nah, man, it made him more powerful, and that's exactly what I need right now." So they say something about the fact of okay, but we're in your pocket dimension and it's filled with swag dealers and devil dudes. What does that say about you? And he's like, that I'm a player. So we see that everyone's battling it out. The devil guy's talking to Noah. Noah's just like, "What do you want with him, devil guy? And he's got a good place here. What's the problem?" And devil guy's just like, "He wanted more than that, so screw you." And Swag basically says "Hey man, that future tech, it's like the robot stuff, but it's better because it's from the future, so go ahead and eat it." And he's like, "Fair enough." So he downs this weird looking centipede thing, and immediately Piper steps in and is just like, "All right, everyone shut up, stop your fighting. What did Klarion just eat?" And it's like, it's nothing. In the future, you are your tech, so it's totally normal to eat this stuff, and it's just going to up his game. And as they are waiting for it to kick in, all of a sudden the world starts swirling, and then there's this giant beast looking Medusa thing that starts attacking that, and everything just goes trippy as hell, and they're all being blasted by what he calls the Purge. And the exact caption box is "OMG, the Purge, nothing to do but go with the flow." And he talks about how magic has too many rules, and it's you got to know exactly what you're doing or else everything gets messed up. And that's kind of what's happening here. And then he talks about how, "Oh yeah, I also put my cat into a jar. I wonder if he's angry." So Piper and Noah make a portal out of this space via the devil's car, and we see Noah's daughter, which was holding the portal open the whole time, is like, "Boy, my arms are tired." So everyone starts making their way out through there. They arrive back in the Moody place, and immediately just "All right, Klarion, what did you learn here?" And he's like, "That Swagbot was the bomb. I'm connected to the shroud. I can see the wild code." And everyone's like, "Klarion, what the hell are you talking about?" And he's like, I got the edge. I can take down Cole because I've got superior tech in me." And then Zell's just like, "Klarion, we had a good thing going here." And he's like, "Screw that. I always knew I would outgrow you. I'm Klarion, bitches." And they're just like, "That's, bro, you got a messed up patch. You're a teenager. We're here to help you." And he's like, "Help me, ha!" And then he blows off this huge amount of energy, steals the devil's car, and drives away. And at that point, they're asking, "Hey, by the way, where's Rasp?" And Zell says, "Oh, he went out with," or not Zell, Noah's daughter, says "Oh, he went out with his girlfriend Contessa," which is obviously the robot. So we cut over to that, where he's making out with his robot girlfriend, and it's just "Hey, because you've got metal body parts too now, Rasp, we can swap and trade. You can see through my eyes and I can see through yours. In the future, when everyone can swap robot body parts, there will be no secrets. Wouldn't it be great?" And he's like, "Aren't secrets kind of sexy though?" And she's like, "No, stupid." So then he pulls open her head cavity, which again, she's a robot, and he's like, "Wait a minute, do you have a recording device in here?" And she's like, duh, that's my memory." And I'm quoting here, or rather, "total recall." So at a certain point, Cole and the helper dude walk in, and it's just "Hey, Rasp, by the way, since she was kind of birthed from your body, she's kind of like your sister/daughter. You really shouldn't be making sexy times with her." And Rasp is like, "I don't want to think about that." So we see Zell is using her little robot dog pet thing named Medusa to follow where Klarion went in the devil's car, and he's using the technology that's currently in his body to track down where Cole is, and he discovers that Cole's dad had a bunch of tech patents for very similar things. So he's like, "Oh, I could use that." And then all of a sudden he feels this horrible pain inside of his palm that starts cracking and swelling. So then we cut over to Cole, who's, I swear to God, I literally cannot even put this one together. His dad is still alive, or at least to some extent he is, has a robot wife that Cole made for him, and the dad is like, "Yeah, screw it, I'm love bot, what's the difference? It's all pheromones." And then Cole recounts saying They stole my father's plans, so he held a gun to his head, but me walking in the room is what triggered him to accidentally pull the trigger. He blew his brains out, and a piece of his skull got embedded into my heart. And then the dad is like, oh, how's that splinter in your heart, son? And Cole's like, not good, Dad, not good. So, is he a robot? I guess he's a clone, whatever. So we see that a bunch of Cole's flunkies in the Necropolitan Club are all trying to get their little buddy bots grown out of the palm of their hands. They each have a sigil on there. Meanwhile, we see Clarion's sigil is not the same. It's in the shape of a centipede. And he's made his way back to Beelzebub's barber shop, where he's basically asking for help on how to get that handled. There's a news segment going on that's basically saying, does AI deserve rights? And we get into a whole creationism and birther argument thing. I'm not about to touch on it, but regardless, Klarion is turned back into his normal skin colors just as Zell shows up, sees the devil's car through the window of the barber shop, just being well, I think we found him. And as he goes inside, Clarion's like, oh, Zell, I'm sorry, are you mad at me for ditching you? And she's like, of course, but I think all friendships are built on low-level anger, which tells me more about Nocenti than anything else. And then all of a sudden, Clarion's palm explodes, and out of it comes a horrific little spider robot version of Klarion that immediately starts to grow to baby-sized. And Clarion's like, get it away from me. I want nothing to do with it. And Zell's like, but you're a father now, Klarion. You gotta care for it. And Klarion and Beelzebub just kind of talk about what's on the news for a quarter second before he's like, all right, I'm out of here. And Zell's left holding the baby. So Klarion goes out to the corner of the Moody house, and he's using a bunch of magic, and he says, bring it on, Cole. I may not have the technology or whatever, but I got pagan magic. I draw my power from a primal ancient place. Nature herself is what fuels me. Together we will bring you down. That's the sound of me dropping the comic, by the way. All right. There's only so many ways I can say I hate this book, but I'm going to try to be creative here. This book might just be the most ADHD, completely off the rails, unfocused mess I have ever read. And I'm left thinking about the Harley Quinn books, because those are aiming to be that. Those are aiming to be off the rails, lull-te-randoms, horrible messes. But that's intentional, and it still doesn't reach the levels that this book does. There is the point where, he's eaten a centipede in his mindscape, and then somehow that means he's done it in the real world. But also, how did he escape from his pocket dimension? And then he stole the devil's car, and then just took it back? And then something about, we had an entire page devoted to the idea of whether or not these robots were okay to have sex with, because their birth from you does not make them your children. The book seems to think yes, but they didn't have a problem spending 4 straight issues showing Rask banging this robot. I'm giving this one a 3. I don't feel I need to justify it any further. I don't like this book. It is ending after the next issue, but not a moment too soon. Batman Eternal number 45, written by Snyder, Tynion, Fawkes, Higgins, and Seeley, art by Javier Fernandez. So, I don't often recount the last issue, but I need to make it clear. Last issue, Batman went out onto a tarmac to attack/stop Professor Milo from Arkham, and then a bunch of ghosts started attacking. This issue picks up with the ghosts attacking, specifically including the ghosts of Thomas and Martha Wayne from the night they died, and it's saying oh, you can fight your enemies, but you can't fight the truth. And then there's this other guy who's apparently the source of these ghosts, who's just here. Where did he come from? I don't know, but regardless, the ghosts start attacking Batman. And it's just like, oh, you couldn't help us. It made you sick. Is this how you honor us? And we see Professor Milo is also getting attacked by all these ghosts. We're saying, like, you were a doctor, but you gave us up to Joker's daughter. You were to be blamed. And we see that the guy is saying, leave Batman alone. It's just Professor Milo you're after. And he says that his name is Martin Ware. He was having nightmares, but now look at him. This is all Professor Milo's fault. He has to be taken out. And Batman just immediately, like, gets rid of the ghosts of his mom and dad, walks over to this guy just being like, this is your fault. Gotham's dying. How do I stop it? And he's like, I can't control it. My name's Mr. Bygone. I didn't want any of this. And Batman punches him in the face and says, you're lying. And as he goes unconscious, all the ghosts dissipate. However, because of him being so scared, Professor Milo starts having a heart attack. And Batman comes over saying, you're not going to die here. And he pulls out a defibrillator from his belt and is getting ready to do that. But then the GP, or the Gotham, I don't know, airport police show up and they're saying, Batman, put your hands in the air. And he's like, nope. And they're like, do it. And he's like, nope, I'm not letting this man die. And he starts trying to shock him back to life as the police are basically saying, like, seriously, man, we're like 5 seconds, we're going to shoot you. Then we cut over to Luke Fawkes' apartment where he's talking about, like, the walls are bleeding as more ghosts are attacking him. And this is apparently completely separate ghost issue to the one that Batman was facing on the tarmac. And he's like, all right, I didn't ask to be there in Gotham. I didn't know any of this was happening, but I'm sick of this. And because he's welded up his gloves with nth metal, he's literally able to start punching ghosts. And he's like, I'm sorry, but you're not giving me a choice. And we see him fighting off the ghosts as Batman is trying to get Professor Milo back to a regular heart rhythm. And in the end, he does end up using a flash grenade to blind the police momentarily. They start firing wildly, but Batman and seemingly Milo get out of there completely unscathed. Meanwhile, Batwing's still punching ghosts, and as he finally finishes, in walks Corrigan, and he's like, hey, man, where the hell have you been? And he's like, hey, look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about how it all went down. You were there at Arkham, and I blacked out. Like, I wouldn't have let you alone in there, but when the Spectre comes out, I don't really have a say in things there. And Batwing just like, you know, you were supposed to teach me something. I mean, that's why I went down there, and you did end up teaching me, like, supernatural stuff is real whether I like it or not, and I need to be able to beat it just like anything else. So, you showed me hell. You literally showed me God's wrath, and he killed hundreds of people. Did all of them deserve that? And he's like, I'm sorry. Like, I know it's been a lot. The ghost things, I get it. But this is what I have to live with every day. So you can always talk to me if you want someone to talk to here. And then Batman's calling up. He's in the plane, calling Corrigan. He's like, hey, Corrigan, need your help. Professor Milo here says he's got some weird-ass book he was reading from. I need you to ID it. And he's like, yeah, sure. Meet me in the Gotham graveyard. We might need to do this on hallowed ground. So Batman arrives to meet up with Corrigan and Batwing. He's got Milo in hand. Passes Milo off to Corrigan so he can explain everything. And then Batman talks to Batwing like, hey, sorry about the whole Arkham thing and how I haven't really checked up on you since then. You good? And he's like, nah, man. I saw horrible stuff down there that I will not forget, but ultimately, not your fault. I'm the one who chose to stay when it all went south. And then in the background, Corrigan punches out Milo. And they're like, Corrigan, what the hell? And he's like, he was starting an incantation. Those books, man, it messes with your head. Anyway, he was saying, it's a book. It's not really a book. It's a thing that was downloaded in his dreams and his memories. Something about a bird that was telling him, like, to do something, to make a wish. And Batman's like, what kind of bird? And he's like, I don't know, any kind of bird. He wasn't specific on the bird. I don't think he knew what type of bird it was. And he's like, that's weird. Anyway, and Corrigan's like, look, Batman, that guy is a normie. He should not have had access to magic like that. So you need to figure out who gave him that level of magic. That's messed up. So then we cut over to the apartment of Harper Row, who's still sitting with Spoiler, and Spoiler's just like, don't you understand? Batman's behind all of this, and you're too stupid to see it. I could explain it all to you if I had like a week, but it'd all go over your head, Bluebird, or whatever your name is. And she pulls out like a tiny little smoke bomb, like hidden between her fingers, to which Harper just immediately has a stun gun aimed at her head and just being like, if you drop that smoke bomb, I'm immediately going to pull this trigger, and I guarantee you I will hit you, so probably don't do that. And one of Stephanie's points is this thing of like, oh, villains wouldn't exist if Batman wasn't around, escalation and all that. And she's just like, who cares? Who cares who came first? Right now, villains are doing bad things, and you have the chance to help us. So why don't you do that? Oh, because Batman scares them, and they're turned into villains. Like, I don't care. And she loads up the stun gun onto an auto-focusing turret, and she's like, if you move more than an inch in any direction before I get back, that thing will knock you out. I'm going to go talk to Batman directly so that we can get you out of Gotham safely, because as much as you're being a bitch, I like you. I think you're cool. So we then cut over to Batman in the Batcave. They're trying to decode all the weird little data virus stuff that they got, I think, from Riddler. And he's saying, like, well, it looks like a signature, but I don't know. It's weird. And Julie's like, hey, maybe you should take a break. Maybe you should, get some sleep. And Bruce is like, you sound like your dad right now. And she's like, shut your mouth. All right, fine. I like my dad. Fine. Whatever. Fine. So at that point, Bruce looks at the data again, and he sees that his company was bought out in small little controlled chunks by a bunch of different companies, and they all have names like Iblis and Dajjal and Jinn International. And immediately Julia's like, those are all names for like ancient demons of Arabic origin. And immediately Bruce is like, oh, son of a bitch, I know who did this. And she's like, what? Who? And he's like, you've been reading the file. Who's the only person who would literally be able to get this far completely undetected and then not be able to resist putting their signature right on at the very end? Who can bend a city to their knees? Who has all of this infrastructure underneath their whims? Criminals, lawmakers. It's Ra's al Ghul. It's Ra's al Ghul is clearly the one behind all of this. And I'm going to go kick him in the face. So that's where the issue ends. I don't think Ra's al Ghul's behind all this, but I more so want to focus on the first part of the issue. They did something. There was some sort of major retcon going on there, and by God, they did their damnedest to make it work, but like, something didn't flow right, because, all right, the hauntings between Luke Fawkes and Batman were not the same. There just happened to be a completely separate ghost problem over with Luke Fawkes that had nothing to do with the Milo ghost problem, because that was a guy named Mr. Bygone. On top of that, who the hell is Mr. Bygone? He just shows up out of nowhere at the beginning of this issue, and we're just like, oh yeah, Mr. Bygone, he's always been here. He was on this airport tarmac where there's nothing around for miles, but he was always there. Like, no, he was not. And then add on top of that, this thing where they then retcon back and say like, oh, by the way, it wasn't a real book. He didn't actually have a book. He actually just had a dream. And that dream he thought was a book. Like, they changed something. Something along the line. I don't know if like maybe it was a plot thread. They were just like, we don't have time for, we have 7 issues left. We need to wrap this up. Maybe. Personally, I don't know, but I think that there was something changed at the 11th hour here where they were like, we don't have the time, drop it, we're doing this now. And so be it. I think it's very clunky the way it was delivered, but if that's the way they want to play it, that's the way it's going to be remembered. So all in all, I think this one was probably actually pretty weak for me. I don't think, especially with Luke Fawkes just punching ghosts, that wasn't a resolution of an arc. He didn't learn anything. Nothing changed for his character that hasn't changed in the past 20 issues. So yeah, it's weak. I'm going to give this one a 6.5. I'm just a little disappointed overall. Hopefully next issue we can get some Ra's al Ghul coolness, but this one was a little bit of a stinker. Future's End number 41, written by Azrael, Lemire, Jurgens, and Giffen, art by Jesus Marino and Andy McDonald. So, Brainiac's attacking. He's setting up a big dome around New York City. Lois is seeing all this happen, and she's like, oh my god, it's all happening so quickly. Is there anything that can stop this monster? And in comes Clark Kent, Superman, bashing against the spheres that are making up the dome, and he's like, I really hoped I wouldn't have to come back. I thought I wasn't the last resort anymore. And then he starts getting zapped by the spheres, and he's like, I don't have time for... And then he gets zapped some more, and it just immediately plummets out of the dome again, and down into the water outside. So up in space, we see I don't want to call them the Stormwatch crew because they're not anymore, but like a couple of the Justice Leaguers and a couple of the Stormwatch crew are seeing the big skull ship that starts screeching out with energy. And they're like, okay, it sounds like 1,000 people screaming. We have to assume that the engineer's in there somewhere. And Hawkman's like, oh, you got to get energy out. And he's ready to fly in and start swinging. But as he approaches the energy, he sees various different timelines and points of DC's continuity. We see literally like Infinite Crisis, the Golden Age, the Silver Age. We see pre-Flashpoint. We see 80s era. We see Red Sun Superman. All these different eras. And as the ship recognizes Hawkman, it blasts him with energy that then starts regressing him through his own continuity, where we see Hawkworld version and then Golden Age version, and then kind of just like fades out. What does that mean? Convergence. So we then go to Terrific, where a bunch of people have died and they were all killed by something. And Batman starts talking to Tim, and he's like starting to say Robin, and he's just like, no, we do not call me that name anymore. And he's like, fine, whatever. There's no power in this building. Get the hell out of here. And he's like, well, you don't think I can deal with this? And he's like, I don't think I can deal with this. And I'm wearing body armor. Get Plastique out of here. And he's like, fine. And he walks over to like go out the front doors, but they lock electronically. And he's like, seems like there's some power in here, man. And he's like, fine, I was mistaken. The power's being controlled remotely. I'll go deal with that, but you guys stay here. And Mr. Terrific is being forced to watch all of this by Brother Eye. And he's basically saying like, take a look. Isn't it extraordinary, amazing, awesome? Perhaps you feel like a complete total fool, Mr. Smartest Man in the world. You see, for all of your brilliance, you have no idea what's about to happen. I, however, exist in all moments at once. I experience the same ends over and over on all the different universes, but it's this planet, this one universe, that really makes it all worth it here. And we see Batman's making his way. He's finding more and more bodies. It's just an absolute bloodbath. And he's like, oh, life is eternal and extinct from me, and I'm about to save you from your own future. And as Batman approaches Mr. Terrific, he turns around from looking horrified to like a big smile on his face. And he's like, Bruce, I'm so happy you're here to see this. So Tim gets on top of the elevator and starts like fixing it up. And Plastique is like, why can't we just take the stairs? And he's like, because I can fix the elevator. So he does manage to get the power running. And she's like, oh, good work, Robin. And he's like, hey, don't ever call me that. And she's like, well, that's who you are, right? And he's like, no, I ain't nothing. I ain't nobody. And up the elevator shaft, we see the monstrous future robot version of Plastique is keeping an eye on them. And Plastique tells Tim, like, hey, you know I turned into a monster, right? And he's like, what do you mean turn? And he's like, oh, very funny, but like, seriously, you're lucky you don't have to worry about that. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, I don't know. I think the only one who's getting out of this is McG, talking about Terry. And she's like, well, at least I hope so. As we see, Terry is currently being stalked by future Joker Batman Cyborg. So, back up near the big Brainiac egg sack, the Justice League is trying to figure out how to teleport down into New York to get Shazam down there. But ultimately, because of the dome, there's no way to get in. And Polaris is like, I could do it. And this is like, yeah, we got Jason Rush inside who's doing all the expert stuff. And he's like, Rush isn't an expert. He's an idiot. And Jason's like, hey, what? And she's like, yeah, no, I can do it. And it's like, yeah, well, you'll teleport us into the center of the earth. And then Firestorm's like, oh, hold on. You did all this because you wanted to save people, right? And he's like, uh-huh. And he's like, well, we can go save people now if you teleport us correctly down into the city and not to the center of the earth. And he's like, makes sense to me. I'm up for it. So he manages to teleport down Shazam/Superman himself and Firestorm into New York City. And they look up and see the giant kaiju Brainiac. And they're like, oh, okay, we're hopelessly outmatched. Except for Shazam, who's like, I'm fighting him. You guys help out whatever people you can. So phase 1 is complete. Brainiac clicks the big button to commence the uplink sequence with the big ship up in the sky. It starts blasting down a purple beam as Brainiac blasts up a purple beam. In flies Shazam to attack Brainiac. A little shoulder cannon just blasts him away, no problem. And as he's being blasted out of the dome, he's grabbed by real actual Clark Kent Superman, who I will call Superman from now on. And Shazam is like, oh my god, Superman's alive. That's crazy. So up in space, Justice League / Stormwatch are battling against the ship, figuring out what they can do. They just like, look, we got to assume Engineer's gone. We can't hold back anymore. So Adam comes at it with a sword and is immediately blasted to smithereens in the giant laser beam as it goes down to the planet. And as it makes connection, we see, I believe it's Plastique, because I can't figure out who else it would be. Or no, maybe it's Lois. She's also wearing purple. Is just looking up at Brainiac. No words are said, no narration, and the issue just ends. It's weak. It's a weak issue. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's got some cool moments to it. I think the Hawkman, seeing the time stuff, seeing the different hyper time aspect to it, and then being blasted through hyper time himself, good hint as to what's upcoming. Good little clue to say convergence. Like, I'm down for it. However, outside of that, I don't think there's really a solid moment in this book. I think maybe a little bit of Batman's banter with Tim. That's about the most I could give it. Add on top of it that, like, I don't know, the end bit, it just feels so sudden. Like, this is not where it really ends an issue, you know? There's no, like, how do I put this? The shot itself is not a big epic shot compared to what has already occurred in this book. It just feels like another shot of giant Brainiac. So the fact that I flipped the page and it's just like, and that's the end of it, without a word being written or anything like that, I think they were going for a punchy moment of like, oh god, they're already too late. But like, it felt like they were too late 4 issues ago. This is just continuing on with that. So yeah, nah, a little bit weak. I think I'm just going to give it a 6. It doesn't really stand out that much for me. The Hawkman stuff, again, being the sole exception, but it's not enough to save the issue. And if anything, do you really want to be hinting at convergence? Earth 2 World's End number 19, written by Bennett, Johnson, and Wilson, art by anybody who can hold a pen. So this issue picks up with all of the parliaments of Earth being attacked by Death Spawn, which apparently could just get to where they were going because despite them saying it's not an actual physical place on Earth, it is, and it's located very close to the core of the planet. So all of the other avatars are feeling the pain that was inflicted to their parliaments, and the last one alive is the Green, who summoned Alan Scott, who then immediately blasts Death Spawn in an attempt to save his own parliament. And we see him like throw some punches. Ultimately, though, it is completely useless, but the parliament manages to escape being killed because Death Spawn just punches open a hole to the core of the planet and dives inside. And Alan tries to stop it because the Parliament recognizes if Death Spawn gets inside, that is the end of the planet, period. And then it does. So Alan's like, I got to go down there and deal with it. And he's like, no, you'll die if you go down there. That's not even a question. We need to try to get the other parliaments back up together, and then we can come up with some other solution to save the world. So back at Adam's Haven, we see that everything is rumbling. There are earthquakes. Things are having problems. And Steele and Sato look around and realize, like, wait, hold on. This is activity on a global scale. The whole Earth is just kind of like shuddering. And also, look out the window. There's a giant-ass lava plume connecting from the fire pits up to Apocalypse, where giant boxes that they're calling satellites are inside. And yeah, clearly this isn't going to work out. So we then cut over to Dick Grayson and Wildcat. And Dick's still looking for the guys who took his son, because God bless him, he needs a plot. And he manages to spot, I can't remember who it, I think Obsidian. I think this one's Obsidian. Sees him from across the way, and then Obsidian casts some sort of trickery on his senses as he meets up with other members of his group, and the other members are just like, oh, well, we can't let them interfere with our plan. So we then see that the roof of this building is cracking open, and ultimately it doesn't seem like there's very much they can do. And something is breaking into the control room as well, and it looks very gross. So we then see that Apocalypse, they're back on the offensive. We see that the Mr. Miracle, Mr. Terrific, and related co. are finishing up their rocket that they're going to take to fire up to get to the ship that Terry Sloan has on standby, and everything's ready to go. Jimmy's like, hey, we're running out of time. They're locking down Earth orbit. We got to go now. So they count it down, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, lift off. And Mr. Miracle's like, Mr. Terrific's like, I know I've said it before, but let's go save the world. So they fly off the planet. We then see Val-Zod and Kara and Red Tornado Lois find one of the satellites that was going up and down in the lava plumes. It's a big-ass cube that looks a little bit fleshy. And they do some examination on it, and it's just like, well, let's see if we can figure out what's going on with it. We then cut back to Jimmy, who's following the rocket and says, ah, crap. They left a bunch of landmines up in space called tick mines. And Jimmy launches the defense system to try to keep the mines away, and they're like, it's no use, there's too many, and you see him start to cry. It's just like, I'm so sorry. Mr. Miracle and Fury grab hold of Terrific and Sandman as the ship explodes, and it's just like, oh, these fleshy little humans aren't going to last 5 seconds out in the vacuum of space. But Fury's like, humans are more durable than you know. And so they somehow seemingly make their way to inside the ship, but I don't think that's actually said directly. So Kara and Val-Zod do some x-raying on the giant satellites, and it's like, wait a minute. This technology, the way Val-Zod puts it is pumping nutrients into the earth in order to tenderize it like meat, as though the planet is going to be devoured. And that's kind of where we get to it, is that this planet's going to be used basically as a fuel source for Apocalypse. So we cut over to someone piloting a jet that has Batman and Huntress in it. They're making their way to, I think it's Sloan Industries, maybe. And they're saying like, yeah, look, if anyone has intel on where the Bruce Wayne Batman's last failsafe was hidden, it's going to be on one of Sloan's computers. So they get dropped off. They head down. Immediately they're attacked by some hallway turrets, to which Helena's like, this is a normal ass office building. Why the hell did office turrets manage to make their way in? So as they're looking for it, they look out the window and see Apocalypse there. And for some reason, Batman is surprised. Thomas looks up at this giant ass planet and goes, what the hell is that? Where have you been, my dude? This is all that's been happening for the past 16 issues. Not a lot happens. Not a lot really happens in this issue. It's a bit of a disappointment, if I'm being honest. It's not that it's inherently bad in its own right, but if I look at any one plot here and say, okay, what did we actually accomplish this issue? The answer for pretty much all of them is nothing. We got a bit more exposition on what those big boxes were, just in the fact that they are essentially salt shakers that are making our planet more tasty. And then we got this rocket explosion thing. But if you had just told me next issue that the rocket made it up and they arrived there, I might be a little bit peeved, but I would accept it. It would be within the normal bounds of okay, the rocket took off and they made it. So be it. Nothing else here really makes sense. And then to add on top of it, Batman just being like, what the... Since when has there been a fire planet outside? And just to be clear on this, Helena's response is, my God, Thomas, Apocalypse is scorching the planet. This is the end. Yes, that's what has been happening. Congratulations. I don't know. It's a weaker one for me. It basically just kind of it almost feels like the worst jumping on point humanly possible, where it's hey, we know that you should have been reading the past 18 issues, but if you're just coming in now, there's a big planet outside, in case you weren't aware. So yeah, I don't know. This one's I kind of want to go a 5.5 if I'm being honest. I'm so bored with this now. And it's literally non-stop action, but I think that's why I'm so bored with it. Is it never lets up. It never gives a moment where it's just okay, maybe we can take the time to focus on Dick Grayson finding his son for a little bit. You can't. Because there's a literal planet crashing down outside the window. So yeah, 5.5. Please give me some breathing room. And that's it. That is all the comics that came out from DC Comics this February 11th, 2015. And every time I look at the sheet, I look at what is coming up and what has already come out, I see the numbers 39. And I gotta tell you, I've always associated the New 52, strangely enough, not ending at 52. I associate it with ending at 40, because that's where we hit convergence, and then New 52 drops off, and it goes to DCYOU. Mind you, as I've made clear, I am going to continue into that section, but like if you check the wiki article for list of DC New 52 imprint titles, which is what I use to build up most of my collection, everything stops at 40. So seeing that I am so close to that is like strangely liberating and also terrifying in a lot of ways. Like, I'm so close. I know I'm still like a year and a half out realistically, but like I'm so close to the what I consider to be the end in a lot of ways that it's striking to me how quickly it's coming up. Anyway, that is all future talk. We'll get to that when we get to that. Now, what do we got coming up next week? Well, we have 16 comics. Unfortunately, we couldn't keep it low for long. In no particular order, those comics are Batgirl, Batman and Robin, Batwoman, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Batman/Superman, Supergirl, Superman/Wonder Woman, Green Lantern New Guardians, Justice League, Wonder Woman, Teen Titans, Trinity of Sin, our 3 weeklies, which is Batman Eternal, Future's End, and World's End, and we got a brand new Multiversity comic as well. This one is about the Nazis. What happens if Superman was a Nazi? Earth 10. That's what happens. That's where we're at. So be sure to check that out if you're interested at all. Beyond that, I don't really have much more to say. I don't think there's anything major coming up in the next week. President's Day. Fun. Be sure to get your President's Day sale. What is that? Isn't that like mattresses? Isn't that always the joke? Like mattresses and like cars, maybe? I feel like I've seen that. I don't know. Regardless, do whatever it is you're going to do. I'm not your boss. So, all that said, if you have any comments that you would like to share about this week's comics, next week's comics, then we could all go ahead and hit me up in the comments below this video, or if you are listening to this, you can find us on one of the many social media platforms we're on. There is a Discord, a subreddit, a Patreon, the links to which are either on screen or in the description if you are curious about that at all. But that's going to do it for me. I will see you next week. Thank you very much for listening, watching, however it is consumed this podcast. Be sure to tune in next time. And always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.